Morning, Whitney. I just wanted to check my volume to see if it works.
Yep, can hear you loud and clear.
Perfect. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey, I need to do a radio check also. We're on
You're good,
generator
Chris.
power. The generator's right behind me. Can you hear that?
I can't hear it. I can
Okay.
just hear you, which is good.
Chris? What's that, Chris? There's too much noise in the background.
Perfect. All right. See you guys later.
Our house has no power either, which means I have had no coffee. So go easy.
We'll break out the camp stove. Whitney, you guys have no tools for this?
I think if you just look at the glare off of my head, I think you'll have enough light to power the building.
We go top of the hour. Good morning, everyone. This is Commissioner Tony DeBone. This is Deschutes County Legislative Update Meeting for Friday, March 7th, 2025. It is 7 a.m., a little bit earlier today. So we can ease into this to see if anybody else. Let me get the list of folks here, participants. According to our agenda, any commissioner updates, kind of priorities, hot topics of the day. Things are happening fast in Salem.
Doug, is Senate Bill 78, does that have life?
Remind me what 78 is, Patty?
That is, if your house burns down and those wildlife risk high stick with your property, you know, the 21,258 that are in our county. And if you have a house that's 3,000 square feet, you can only build back 2,500. That's the maximum.
I think there are a lot of wildfire bills out there
Yes.
on the horizon, and many of them are being kind of considered in what I think is going to be kind of an omnibus package again. Haven't seen that package, don't know what's in it yet, although we've been assured that'll probably include the elimination of the maps and discussions of insurance issues that are, of course, at the front and center of everybody's mind. And then issues like that may also be covered. So I don't think the base will be 678, which is the Republican bill. But I do think that something is going to be considered and passed and moved.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anything to start off with, Commissioner Chang? Okay, yeah, so seeing none. Updates from Doug. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. As I say, I understand 7 o'clock start instead of 8. We got our AOC meetings later today, but yeah, what's the tone and the tenor and the speed of these days?
Well, thank you, commissioners and staff. Things are speeding up, accelerating here in the Capitol. I'm sitting outside the Capitol. There is an 8 o'clock Capitol Construction Subcommittee meeting followed by a 9:30 Ways and Means Committee meeting. This is the first and kind of traditional early in the session budget rebalance reconciliation bill that goes through. You can take a look at the series of 4 bills. House Bill 5505 is the main bill. That's the rebalance bill. It includes $200 or $300 million in new spending. The bulk of that spending is pay adjustments for state employees. Almost every department gets a pay bump, so state employees can expect a pay increase. There are other issues in the bill. One issue in Central Oregon that's being fixed is a definitional change in Jefferson County for Madras for their housing infrastructure package. But there are other small adjustments in DHS and OHA and ODOT, which are typical at the beginning of the session. I mention this because thus begins on Monday the real hard work of the budget. They've received the first revenue forecast, which came out last week. It was up $350 million the next biennium. That's a good thing, means the economy is still growing to a certain extent. But they are facing uncertainties about what might happen with the federal funding in a variety of areas. You know, will Oregon sanctuary status lead to budget cuts? Will Medicaid eligibility be modified in some way, shape, or form? Will justice reinvention funding be reduced? So those things aren't known yet and probably won't be known for some period of time. And so that lends a bit of uncertainty in the state budget process. So we'll have to keep a close eye on that. There's some big issues coming up. I know the county department heads are aware that public testimony for some of the major issues in Ways and Means either has happened or will be happening in the next few weeks. Criminal Justice Commission was up here a couple of weeks ago. Community Corrections is coming up this next week. I know Dee's aware of that and has been working with her colleagues. But just stay tuned. Public testimony and opportunities for input will be arising in the next few weeks. So stay light and nimble and on your feet, and I'll try to keep you posted.
Great. Thank you very much. Holly.
Hi, do you know when the impacts or when the general public testimony for the Criminal Justice Commission that got rescheduled because of the snowstorm, do you know if that's been rescheduled yet? Because that'll be when I testify for impacts, since I didn't get to last time.
Yeah, Holly, we were expecting it to be rescheduled for last week and it wasn't. So I haven't heard. I'll double check again. The last time I asked was about a week ago, but let me check on that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Last thing I'll say is the Capitol is very busy. There are days in the Capitol every single day, sometimes 2 or 3 days in the Capitol, which is filling up the Capitol. It's a small building anyway, and with the construction, it's even smaller and more compact. So it's been very crowded. Some controversial issues have begun coming up. There was the ban on vape products and inhalant delivery systems here this past week. That drew a huge crowd. We can expect as we get more into this, deeper into the session, some of those controversial issues will be popping up and will keep us on our toes. So I think I'll stop there. I know Jen's got some bills we need to get through this morning.
Commissioner Chang.
Doug, you mentioned some of the top line federal concerns like Medicaid and education, but I'm aware of all kinds of federal funding that underpins, it seems like just about every state agency that I know of, Oregon Health Authority, the housing, state parks, Oregon Department of Forestry. When will we have some sense of how, when will we have some sense of what is going on with some of those, federal programs directly to states, Oregon Department of Transportation, so that we can plan accordingly with budgeting in those agencies?
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. I don't think we'll have firm answers in a lot of these areas by the end of the session. And so that if I had to guess, I would guess that the Ways and Means co-chairs set aside some amount of funding in a savings account or a SPA, special purpose appropriations account, so the E board can come back and backfill in critical areas. I don't know how much that will be, but I think most of us in the building believe that some amount of money will be put into a reserve fund to address those issues. There was a hearing this week, and one of the things that was mentioned is that in some areas there may be federal funding returning to the states if programs are cut at the federal level. So they might say, we're going to not do something at the federal level, therefore states get a slightly higher bump in certain areas. But I don't think that any of that's going to be resolved until the budget process is complete in September, October of this year.
So reserve funds is the best way to proceed. It sounds like when in doubt, just try to define a reserve. Okay, so Jen, if you can help, what's the best way to go here now? Because we have a couple items to discuss, but then the list of legislative report.
Yeah, so I think we just go through the report. The three things that were in the list are in the report as part
Yep,
of bills
okay,
that we're gonna
okay.
report it on. If we start running out of time, because one of them's the very last one, I might flag that to pop that up further. But the first one we have is on page 2. It's 2 Board of Commissioner bills, or I filed it under Board of Commissioners, I should say. That Doug and company flag. So I'll turn it over to Doug to introduce 3565.
Well, I think we talked about this last time, didn't we? Or is there another bill on this? So allows siting and operation of small modular reactor energy facility, or maybe the other one was allowing the discussion.
Yeah, Commissioner, what I pledged to do was check in to see if this bill had any legs.
Oh, okay. All right, so this is that.
And initially, what I'm hearing from most people is that it may get a courtesy hearing and is not likely to move through the session. And I think part of that is because the provision in the bill that discusses siting of small nuclear reactors, even in the absence of knowing where you would put the spent nuclear fuel. That's problematic for a lot of people in the building. So my guess is it might get a courtesy hearing, but probably won't move through the process.
So yeah, I was able to sit down at a lunch with the governor, and this was brought up by Umatilla, and the governor said, we probably, 1980 was a moment for Oregon, and it got stopped, but she supports, what I heard her say is she supports the fact that maybe we should need to look at this again. So that's why I say I support this discussion. Deschutes County proper, energy is very important, knowing that it's not a clear path. So as I say, I would still give this a thumbs up because the legislators are the one making the decision. So that's the Deschutes County's position. And we did talk about this. Do you think is it valuable to take a position on this? So Doug, because we did talk about this.
I would say, Commissioner, that if it moves towards a hearing, we might consider some input, but absent scheduling a hearing, I would say that there are probably issues that are more likely to move this session.
Yeah, as I say, let's not spend any more time on it. So let's leave it no position. We've said our piece. You understand where we're going and if it needs to go anywhere. So yeah, Jen, if you can leave it on the list, and we'll, I think I did conclude with Commissioner Dare and I were supporting this. Commissioner Chang has reservations about it, but I understand. Let's not bump around on this one.
Great. The next one is HB 3570. And again, I'll turn this over to Doug as one that I think Corey flagged for us to look at.
Yeah, we put this on the list because we know these issues and topics are important to Deschutes County. I'm curious if any of the staff has had a chance to take a look at the bill. I do think that this has a little more likelihood of being incorporated into a larger package or moving, but I did want to hear some input from staff in particular.
Yeah, so the concept appropriates money, Oregon business development, community infrastructure projects related to production of new housing. That sounds like our path. So any other thoughts from anybody?
And at this time, I haven't assigned it for review for anyone else, so I can do that and we can come back to it next week. So give staff a little bit of time to look further into that.
Commissioner Chang.
Is this the table, the matrix says that this is a Helm-Owens bill? Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, something you've been working on. This the question is whether or not having the business development department compile a list of water infrastructure projects like this would be valuable. And it obviously will be time consuming and expensive. But I think their concept is that right now the process is kind of scattershot. There's no one way for the state to identify water projects. The League of Cities a year ago compiled a list. I think it ended up being $2.8 billion, which obviously there wasn't $2.8 billion in the budget to compile. And I'm not sure the business development department is the right department to compile the list. And that's one thing I'd be curious from the staff is that the appropriate department to be compiling a list like that? And if there's a list, is that something that we think would be useful Would we be willing to participate? Those types of things.
Well, I mean, I guess I would say we know that water infrastructure is one of the critical bottlenecks on housing in many of our cities, you know, like the city of Bend, their water infrastructure, water, wastewater, backwater, you know, stormwater backlog is probably, you know, several tens of millions of dollars, you know, just for the existing city. I would be supportive of bringing more focus on this, on water infrastructure issues. You know, I'm not sure whether, as you were saying, Doug, whether this is the exact right way to do that, but you know, certainly to just put an exclamation point on the water, wastewater infrastructure needs, you know, in our municipalities is, I think, a good idea.
So is there support, priority 2 position of support is the proposal. Do we support that between the commissioners this morning?
Sure.
And I do also, Commissioner Dare.
Sure, it's unanimous.
Okay. So as I say, now we know about this number 3570, and we'll follow it as it evolves.
Great. Next up is page 5. I don't see Peter on here, but it's HB 2135, and both roads and CDD reviewed this. Peter had it as a 1 support, Chris had it as a 2 support. So Chris, since I don't see Peter popping up anywhere, are you prepared to?
Yeah, I'm not more or less letting CDD kind of carry the water on this one, but basically it allows that middle housing requirement to occur within urban unincorporated areas. So in terms of providing duplex, triplex, quadplex development opportunities, of course, it's hot and heavy in the cities, but they want to also apply that to the unincorporated communities as well. And we just have issues from an infrastructure perspective. You know, are those communities, Tumalo, Terrebonne, and in our case, you know, capable of accommodating that type of density, not just with you know, it's an urbanization, but without an urban standard to accompany it. And, you know, and it applies to other things like schools, like, you know, the water districts and sewer districts that are attempting to start in these areas that, you know, are probably taxed a little bit more in providing capacity to that type of urbanization within unincorporated communities. So again, we're concerned from that infrastructure perspective in terms of fit. This type of thing is meant for urban areas. It's meant for cities. Applying it in unincorporated communities is probably not a good fit, good option. Nick has his hand up.
Yeah, Nick.
Yeah, let's not forget the other big unincorporated community we have is Sun River. And so we may want to just touch base, or I can touch base with James Lewis, for example, just to see if Sun River's aware of it, if they're taking a position on it or not. Because they may have the infrastructure, but they may not want to proceed with this. So in any event, that's the biggest one.
Yeah, well, and this is a pretty big policy statement if that would go, because, you know, urbanization with roads, water, and sewer is different than a historically platted, you know, rural community that doesn't have those infrastructure. Commissioner Chang.
I was just going to say, in short order, our unincorporated communities, Tumalo, Terrebonne, and Sun River are all going to have access to water and wastewater, which I think is, you know, kind of the key concern in terms of, you know, whether there's adequate infrastructure to support, you know, a couple of duplexes or triplexes, you know, in an unincorporated community. So, I mean, maybe we could ask for an amendment, you know, that addresses specific, that addresses the adequacy of infrastructure in unincorporated communities. You know, you can have these greater opportunities, you know, essentially granting people new property rights in unincorporated communities where adequate infrastructure exists.
So for clarity, that would be some kind of a support with edits or something.
Support with amendments. Yeah.
Commissioner Dare.
We're going to grant new property rights. I don't think that's the theme of what I'm reading. So anyway,
Do it all the time.
oh, that's right, don't we?
ADUs, RV rental dwellings, etc.
Yes, and look how many we've built. What is it? A marvelous 30? Unless,
Yeah.
Peter, we've built a few more lately. Yeah, it's really just depressing because I thought those would really help.
Yeah, well, it just shows that property rights
Excuse me, I
aren't the
wasn't done
only
talking,
reason.
Commissioner Chang. Could you like at least let me finish my sentence? Thank you.
Please do.
Nope, now you went to mute, Commissioner Dare.
I went to mute on purpose.
Okay.
I was not done speaking, and
Yeah.
I would appreciate having my time. Thank you.
Yeah, so as I say, this is touching a hot button already. I would say a position of opposition, oppose. I support opposition. Yeah, number one priority says go in, real hot on this. So we're going to be split, it looks like a little bit. I don't know, priority 2 with a 2+, or understanding this is a hot topic for us already. So expands middle housing requirements to be included in urban unincorporated lands. So if I was a resident of Tumalo, Terrebonne, we've leaned into trying to help the community take their own leadership committee of putting sewer in. Everybody knows that's going to, spur some either undeveloped properties in the area that people like, and I see that in the rural also. But dropping this right on top of it is, oh, by the way, you can have multi-unit housing, middle housing, apartment style. That's a step that is kind of shocking probably for some of those areas.
I mean, we were just through this with the Tumalo Community Plan, right? In the Tumalo Community Plan, people said, well, we might want a little bit of multifamily housing, but we want to put some sideboards around how big the building would be and how many units you could have in it. And people came up with a reasonable compromise, which seems like accommodates this policy. So, I really don't understand what the opposition is to allowing more housing at a property owner's discretion.
Yeah. So as I say, how can we get to a position here? How about number 2, oppose, understanding that this is our discussion, though. I mean, as I say, if we come to this is our negotiation. This is us. This is Deschutes County. Commissioner Dare, you support that to oppose at this time?
I do.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, let's bring it up to another board meeting. Look at the words of it, understand what the opportunities or what we're really talking about here. Okay, thank you.
Okay, next we have community justice. We have 2. I'm going to read out the bill summary. We've got Doug doesn't have the bills in front of him, so has some background on what we're talking about. So the first one up is 2972. This is the one we talked about briefly under other items on Wednesday. We have a logo request support to add for this one, and the summary is it provides funding to the Employment Department for staffing workforce reentry programs for adults in custody. With that, I'll turn it over to DB.
Thank you. Good morning. The logo request is a little bit confusing because it is asked the link that was attached to, here's how you can advocate, add your logo to this. You click on the link and it's a 2-pager that doesn't specify 2972 specifically. It kind of talks about support workforce efforts, this legislative session, including 2972, which is how I read that. So I just want to give that caveat. We support 2972 in terms of providing workforce reentry programming staffing, which is why we would support putting the logo on. And I believe anybody or any supporter of the EDCO, Commissioner DeBone, I think you also received this logo request. as
Remember,
well.
yeah, it was from East Cascade Works, because
Yes.
that's why I was like, oh, I forgot what this was, the other day. But this is East Cascades Works, WorkSource Reentry 2972, and also Prosperity Programs, Prosperity 10,000, P10K, House Bill 3666, 3669. So there was two of them that were mentioned there. Doug.
Yeah, just full disclosure, I also work with all 9 local workforce boards. East Cascades is one of those workforce boards. And I agree with you, DV. I think they were asking on the workforce reentry program. They'd probably appreciate support of Prosperity Programs, which has done great things in Deschutes County as well, but that might be a separate discussion. But I just want to give a little background on this particular workforce reentry. Was a pilot project at Deer Ridge that works with inmates who are getting close to being released to try to connect them with services and training and link them to employment opportunities outside of the prison system when they're released. And the recidivism rate is dramatically reduced. It really is incredible. It's consistent on national studies as well. But so this is a request to continue the program because the federal funding was a one-time only grant, if that helps.
So 2972 is number priority 2 support, and there's a logo ask. And then, yeah, DV's pointing out that it's a logo for maybe a package of bills that we're not real clear on what we might be doing if we do that. Is that correct, DV?
I think they do have a one-pager just with logos just on the reentry, and we can make sure that the logo only goes on that one-pager right now. I can make sure that happens.
Okay. So is there support for logo support?
Yes, please. Deer Ridge is so incredible, that welding program and what they do. And actually, I was speaking with Judge Ashby the other day about people, if we can get them to Deer Ridge, the way out and not go back into prison is really excellent there. So totally would support that.
Okay. Any thoughts, Commissioner Chang?
Support.
Okay. And then Jen.
When you check on the logo request, so you go one more step on there, which I just did, and you enter your information, you have options to enter to say what you support. And it's 3 things. I support the following initiatives: WorkSource Reentry, Prosperity Programs, Oregon's Trucking Crisis. So those are the 3 options. You can click any or all of those boxes.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
and then you just put your organization in and your name. So a little similar to the testimony at that juncture.
Okay. Well, so for 2972, we're supportive. The other one mentioned was Prosperity Programs. In East Cascades counties alone, over 1,000 people have enrolled, achieving 93% completion. 66% of participants were unemployed at the time, are now employed. Overall, participants are earning an average of $21.58 an hour. So that's from our East Cascades work advocacy for 3669. Sounds like there's support for that also. So we were, on the bill report, it's just 2972. This was the other topic that was mentioned in the email I was referring to. Commissioner Dare, Commissioner Chang. So this is down that same path.
I can support.
Yeah, so it'll be a legislative funding discussion in the end, I'm sure. Okay.
So
yeah.
I'm hearing support for the 2972, and I'm sorry, the 3,000 bill. I don't have that number in front of me.
3669. So, and I think this was the original email I had forwarded as a reminder from Heather Ficht of East Cascades work. So that'll help you trace it back to how it got started.
Great. So I'll add those 2 as the 2 support. And then do we additionally have the logo request for those 2 items in support? Or we're not there yet? Yes,
It looks like there's
I'm seeing nodding heads.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'll do it for
Great.
the 2 for the WorkSource Reentry and Prosperity Programs. Great.
Thank you so much.
All right, next up with sticking with DV, we are HB 5004, which appropriates money from the general fund to the Department of Corrections for certain biennial expenses.
Yes, thank you, Jen. We have talked about this before. This is number one priority for AOC's Public Safety Subcommittee, which would be full funding, actual cost study funding for community corrections, which would be the equivalent of $18.18 a day per adult on supervision. The current bill, 5004, which is the governor's recommended budget number, is less than $18.18 a day. It's around $16 a day. So we need an additional amount. We support with the amendment to increase, which would be our request today, is to put our logo, I believe, on the AOC's 2-pager, if I'm not mistaken. And I see Doug's got his hand raised, but I think that's where we're at with the request this morning.
Yeah, I'll just jump in here really quickly. There's been a lot of work in the Capitol in the last few weeks with the coalition. So we've all been talking. There have been a couple meetings in the last 7 or 8 days that have been very positive. There was a meeting this week with the chair of the Public Safety Subcommittee on the House side. That's Paul Evans. He has been kind of a skeptic on some of these programs and has had a lot of questions. I think that the county coalition, AOC, and others have done a good job in answering his questions, allaying his fears. I'll note that the other public safety subcommittee chair is Senator Broadman from Deschutes County, who obviously has a good understanding of these issues and I think is also supportive. So I'm encouraged by where this is going at the present time. This letter is a part of that process.
Are we in a spot for, so the amendment is just defining that $18.18. That's what I'm looking at our bill report. So I'm supportive of that, Commissioner Chang.
I wanted to ask Doug or anyone else if they know how this level or this amount adjusts from year to year, right? So once you get to 16 whatever or 18 whatever, does it, is this just part of the current staffing level for the agency and gets bumped up, on an annual basis to adjust for inflation, or is it then fixed at 1818 after this piece of legislation is passed?
Thank you, Doug. I'll take that if you can probably add in. So it's kind of a yes and a no, Commissioner. The community corrections budget is very interesting from a state agency perspective. We are the only entity, as in community corrections, who has to undergo what is called an actual cost study every so often. That is legislatively set. We have never been actually fully funded for the actual cost study ever. So it's an interesting, legislative says we got to do it, but then we do it, and it's always sort of it's subject to negotiations, right? So let's be positive and say we get to 1818, that becomes our new current service level. And that is a reflection of the actual cost of about 8 months ago. So it was a pretty timely study. Once it's set, then we're kind of subject again for another several years. I believe it's every 4 years. There's an actual cost study. Doug, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But then the budget gets set with some cost of living inflationary things sometimes, but it's not the same as other state agencies that just get this, immediate bump every year. At least that's my understanding. Because it is a pass through to counties, I believe that's why they sort of set it as a slightly separate funding process. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it emphasized to me why we would want to fight even harder to get to the full 1818.
Good. So it looks like there's support. We're calling it a priority 1, support with amendments referring to that funding level. Commissioner Dare? Oh, you went the other way. Mike?
No, I mean, isn't it fascinating that it's going to 1818, but we know it probably should be 2020. Yeah. And we're just making more, just always behind instead of actually getting where we need to be. So
you support?
Yeah, I support it, but
Okay.
I think it's really sad that we're not actually really taking care of the situation.
Yeah, well, in this inflationary environment, it's like slipping out of our hands as it's happening almost.
My
But yeah,
favorite
let's go
cookies
forward
are-
with that.
Yeah, my favorite cookies went up $1 in a month.
Oh,
$1. I was like, I can't buy these anymore.
yeah, there you go. Okay, thank you very much. We will proceed with that. Support with amendments, priority 1.
Great. Next, we're on page 8, District Attorney. We have District Attorney Gunnels on. First one is HB 3576, which transfers to the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission the responsibility to develop a formula for the distribution of grant funds to counties for deflection programs.
Yeah, this bill, I believe, was sponsored by Clackamas County, and it transfers that the responsibility for coming up with the formula to CJC, which is would probably be beneficial to us. And the way that it's currently formulated has been controversial, at least. And I know behavioral health has had some issues with the way that the formula has been constructed by the OAC. But I would generally be, I think, supportive of it, although the Oregon District Attorneys Association isn't taking a position on it yet. I believe AOC, and Doug would know this obviously better, is generally neutral on the particulars of the formula, but is in favor of CJC taking over control of establishing the formula.
So when it comes to AOC position, we have AOC days today and then Monday. So this would be valuable if it comes up to understand that. So Commissioner Chang.
Steve, could you run through for us the way that the formula is currently calculated?
No, the OAC constructed it in a way that I think kind of well, the way that it's constructed as a whole is that it benefits or funds the tribes more than perhaps their need would suggest, based on population or need within the tribes. And so that part has been controversial. But that's kind of a minor quibble because the tribes aren't getting that much of it. ODAA is staying neutral because different counties will benefit to different degrees, and some counties will probably suffer a little bit if the formula is reconfigured. I believe that the currently established baseline is 150,000 per county, and if that gets changed, then some of the smaller counties may benefit from that because that number is likely to go up. The baseline number is likely to go up, and the larger counties are likely to go down a little bit. Is my belief about it.
So what about the middle counties like us? I mean,
I think we're likely in a position where our funding would go up a little bit for deflection.
Okay. I'm also wondering whether behavioral health has any kind of insights or reflections on this issue as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious what Doug might have to add, because I think I might be conflating two issues. There's there's the Behavioral Health Resource Network funding run with the OAC, and I think there's legislation going through around changing that funding formula as well, because that has been extraordinarily problematic. And then there's this deflection funding where they're trying to, my understanding is trying to just raise the base amount for these small counties. And so, Doug, I actually would like.
Well, I just say that this, as District Attorney Gunnels pointed out earlier, this is a Clackamas County bill. All the co-sponsors are from Clackamas County. Clackamas County was very unhappy with the initial funding formula. They got no money initially under the deflection program. They were rejected, and that lit a fire under their fingernails. And this is what they've come back with. I do not think this bill is moving. I do think that there will be changes to the formula, and I think that Ways and Means is questioning, how do we separate strict deflection activities out from treatment and wraparound programs. So I believe that there's going to be quite a bit of discussion on what's the adequate number for deflection, and then what do we need to make sure that we've got the programs in the community to be able to handle that. That's an ongoing discussion, but I don't think this bill is going to move. So I wouldn't. My recommendation is put it on the tracking list, keep an eye on it. If it begins to move, we can get back to you and let you know if there's going to be a hearing.
And Doug, so you do think that there's going to be tinkering with the funding formula. Do you know where, like, is there a bill where that is happening, that is moving, or just a lot of discussions?
There's Senate Bill 6, I believe it's 610, and I'm sorry my Wi-Fi isn't working sitting outside of the Capitol, but there's another Washington County bill, very similar, mess with the deflection calculation, the burn calculation in this particular case. Yeah, right, Holly, burn. And these two are related. Washington County is not happy with what they got in burn funding, and Clackamas County isn't happy with the deflection process. So these are two county-specific focused bills. The Senate Bill 610 has had a hearing. It was quite an interesting hearing that I sat through. Holly, I think you were watching as well. And I don't know where that bill's going either. But we can certainly put both of these bills on the tracking list and keep an eye on them as they move forward. But I will say it might be, this bill, Steve, that you've mentioned might be worth having a department head sit down and have a conversation with. We do have the chair of the Addictions Committee and the Judiciary Committee in Representative Krupp, as well as the chair of the Public Safety Subcommittee, Senator Broadman. So if the staff can put together some maybe specific recommendations of concerns that we would have with the formula, rather than just saying transfer it to another agency, that might be more useful for them to have that discussion.
I like that idea.
Oh, yeah, Commissioner, sorry.
Yeah, I like the idea. I would support that kind of department heads providing, constructive feedback.
Holly.
Yes, sorry, I'm in a hotel, so my internet is spotty. But the burn funding, I think it's not necessarily the formula, it's the process. It was a very biased process for how they were determining to roll these dollars out. There were applications submitted across the state. They were scored. Scoring was not necessarily adhered to. There was conflicts of interest. There was statements made by the OAC that CMHP shouldn't get this funding because they can bill Medicaid, which isn't actually true.
Looks like you maybe dropped off there, but I got the ideas there. So Holly, we're not hearing you, if you can hear me. So to Jen.
Yeah, I was just going to say for a technical, we are tracking SB 610. It's under Holly.
There we go. So yeah, you were dropped for a while, Holly.
Okay, well, I can provide some comments about this to Jen, and thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So we will get notification if SB 610 moves at all. Right now we have it as 3. So internally we get notifications when there's some activity there on that bill. So we can keep it as a 3 or move it up to a 2 if you want to see it on the report. And I also took note of having staff provide more context on HB 3576 and SB 610. So we could move in HB 3576, so 2 watch. And then if we
Yep,
see
that's what I was
activity on
thinking.
there.
2 watch is where I would propose for today. See, and there's, yeah, moving parts here. Commissioner Chang, do you support that? Yeah, okay. I don't see Commissioner Dare on the video, but,
Yes.
okay, there we go.
I
Thank you.
support it. Thank you.
2 watch.
Great.
And yeah, so that's gonna be a bigger one. And yeah, let's make sure we're keeping up on that.
Next up, again, DA Gunnell's SB 536, which provides that a licensed physician, associate, or nurse practitioner may be a medical examiner.
Yeah, this one would be a beneficial law to help smaller counties to recruit medical examiners so that it doesn't have to be a medical doctor running that show. I would defer to Dr. Onishi if I would assume that she thinks that this would be a good idea, but I don't know that. It would be, although from my point of view, it would be better to have more options because we do have a difficult time even in Deschutes County finding a medical doctor who is willing to take those extra duties.
Great. Doug, do you have a comment on this one?
No, I have a question. There was a MEOW work group, the best named work group ever in the history of the state. And I don't remember if this was one of the recommendations of the MEOW group. Does anyone have any recollection of that?
Yeah, so I got involved a little bit on that, and I was promoting the fact that there's recommendations coming out. It was more of the capital path, so I wasn't following this topic.
Yeah, I'll check into that.
Okay, well, so yeah, my thought is, if somebody with being a physician associate or nurse practitioner can probably do X amount up to something, and then you need to bring it to the next level. So it seems like we could plug in this resource. But I do support talking to Dr. Onishi about what does she know? What would she see in that domain? And this would be good for Eastern Oregon. From that report, you learn that there's a lot of density in the metro area, and the medical examiner's office, and but then the transport is just a disaster from bringing people in from far reaches of the state, because then it just doesn't happen. Okay, so is there support? Number 2 priority, support for this. We'll learn more information also.
I'm happy to do that. Actually, what you look at is historically what's happened in Pendleton. 100 years ago, they were licensed for 75 beds. Today, they have 24 beds. So all the doctors of the community leave because there are no beds in the hospital. It's really it's a bit of a tragedy for a hospital where the population isn't really that low.
So just any kind of medical capacity. Yeah, understood. Okay, Commissioner Chang. Don't see him.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay,
I'd like to know what Dr. Onishi thinks.
Yep, thank you.
All right, I'll mark it to support, but follow up with Dr. Onishi.
Okay,
We're going to skip facilities right now. We have 3 more bills to get through that we have special requests attached to. One is not marked on here as a late request. It is, it's under finance, but Scott Langton's on to talk about it. It's HB 3518, which increases the county recording fee that is credited to the county assessment and taxation fund and indexes the fee to inflation. The commissioners have taken a previous priority 1 support on there, and this is just a testimony request. So I'll turn it over to Scott.
Hey, good morning. This is Assessor Scott Langton. Yeah, sorry I don't have a camera, but today. Yeah, and there's a public hearing and work session scheduled for Tuesday afternoon. Myself and I think Commissioner DeBone have been asked to submit testimony in favor of it. This will be a huge bump to stabilizing assessment and taxation funding, and it basically takes what was done in 2001, so we're talking almost 25 years ago. The way the funding mechanism worked, there was no escalators. So this brings it to current, basically under the same framework, where a little bit from the districts, a little bit from recording fees, and some from the general fund. So I don't know if there's questions or specifics or how you want to organize this, but I will be in Salem on Tuesday afternoon.
So that's a request to testify, or you're the elected official, you'll be there, but I mean, you're a request for us to participate and support. And I've been asked to testify in this also. And I mentioned this bill to, what was it, the City of La Pine joint meeting, I think, the fact that that 0.3% across the tax base people need to know that. The other districts need to understand what that proposal is.
Yeah, real quick, Commissioner, that 0.3% right now, currently, we're taking and retaining a portion of delinquent interest that would go to the districts. So that nets out in some studies we've just recently done. City of Bend's, of course, the biggest. It will only cost them an additional $33,000 a year. So you have to look at the netting. It's not like an additional, it's shifting. And then that way it'll have escalator built into it where the delinquent interest didn't.
And just like you've said in the past, it'll optimize and make sure we're not falling behind on just the true assessed value as time goes on. Any thoughts, commissioners?
I think we should let Scott go testify on that. Or support Scott in going to testify on that. He's his own elected official, so I think he has the discretion to do that.
And I'll be able to testify also. It'll be remote though, because we've got a joint meeting with the City of Redmond that night.
Yes. Yes. Good luck, Scott.
Well, there's a whole team, AOC, this is their top priority, one of them. They will be there in force. A number of commissioners will be. It's a joint effort between AOC and our associations. So hopefully we'll get some positive momentum on this.
Great. So House Bill 3518 A&T funding, and we've already taken a position of support. So thank you very much for joining us, Scott.
Great. Next up, page 14, we have Health Services, Behavioral Health. We have Holly Harris and Paul Partridge on to talk about SB 5526, which is a Ways and Means bill. And this one, we have a testimony request as well as a support request. So I'll turn it over to Paul.
Morning, everybody. Yeah, this is kind of priority one for AOC MHP. This is, we are talking about it as our budget bill for intellectual developmental disabilities specifically, but you'll see that the Senate Bill 5526 includes some other DHS programs to level funding. Specifically for intellectual developmental disabilities, though, similar to how Devi was describing her funding model for community justice, we go through a similar cost study. It's known as the workload model study that's done for, I think, all DHS branches. And similar to how Devi was describing it, that model goes to the legislative body and then it's open to negotiation. And we have traditionally never been fully funded to how that is described. Last session, we were funded at approximately 86% of what it actually takes to operate an IDD program. And we are fortunate in this community to have a commitment of County General Fund to sort of fill the gap, as it were, and then we're able to match those funds. This bringing that funding up to 100% would actually negate the need to utilize local funds, at least to that extent. So I'm asking that there's support for myself and our community members to be able to do written testimony in support of this Senate bill.
I'm nodding my head yes, and see Commissioner Chang. Commissioner Dare?
Of course.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Great. Next up, we have Custodia Road. Sorry, this one wasn't highlighted in blue, but you can see in the middle of the page, it's HB 2795. This is a new bill to discuss for these meetings. Chris has us to support. It's to modify the definition of qualified entity for purposes of the statewide Transportation Improvement Fund distributions for public. You also in your email received a draft letter of support. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chris.
Page
Yeah.
18 in our report.
Sorry, page 18.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
So thank you, Jen. We were approached by CET yesterday. The bill itself, as it sits, changes the definition of qualified entity, but it doesn't really apply to anything that would affect our situation. CET is proposing a modification or amendment to the bill that would allow language to further define qualified entity and basically allow counties such as Deschutes, Crook, Jefferson to designate a public transportation service provider as the qualified entity. So instead of being basically the pass-through entity as we are today, where we're receiving all the funds, all the administrative expense and process of then working and contracting with CET to be that entity, the funds would basically pass directly to them, and we'd be out of the administrative burden of having to budget, expend, do all those things that we currently do today. So what they're asking for is support of a letter that would basically support their concept of adding that language to allow counties to designate that qualified entity. They've made this request from Crook and Jefferson as well. Big fan of this request. The burden does kind of fall to myself and staff here at the road department, and we'd like to be out of this business. It ultimately would allow the board to make that decision, though, one way or the other. And but so you don't have to make up your mind today about whether or not you want to be the qualified entity. This would provide that option, and we think it's a good idea. So just asking for support or signatures on that letter of support.
Yep. I'm on the COIC board, the transportation CET aspect of this whole thing is flowing pretty well these days. It's kind of that catch-22 of if we had more money, we could run more buses. And now we're talking about the policy of having a card to get on the bus and basic revenue reimbursement policy. So there's a lot of moving parts there right now, but I'm supportive of this. Commissioners?
It sounds fine.
I like the idea of taking us out as a middleman, so I would support those amendments that CET is interested in.
And the reason we're even here is just because transportation evolved from the city of Bend to the regional connectors to the Tri-County area, and now the payroll tax dollars that are truly reoccurring revenue that's coming in. So this seems like a real supportive, a real good thing for Central Oregon. So I'll support that also. So it looks like we'll be able to proceed with signatures on this letter.
Okay, and I'll change this, and I apologize. I put in the support without talking to Chris. I'll change and put support with amendment, which is what I'm hearing here, because the bill as written doesn't have that amended language that Chris was talking about. So I'll change the position to support with amendment to support and circle the letter with all three of your signatures on there, it sounds like. Great.
Could you review the change again? I'm not following that.
The change is adding in the language to allow the local, correct me if I'm wrong here, Chris, on the.
Oh, I thought that was
local,
in
the
there
public
already.
entities to determine who the QE is.
Yeah,
Is
and
that
that's
not
within the bill tracker document, not within the letter itself here.
So currently the SB 2795 does not have that language in there. So they're trying to get that language added.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
And then, so it looks like we have 4 minutes, so we can go back, unless there's something else, we can go back to facilities bill if Lee is available. This is page 10, HB 2688, which applies the prevailing rate of wage to certain offsite custom work fabricated, assembled, or produced in accordance with specifications for particular public works.
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me. I'll just briefly say the concern is that it would expand prevailing wage and that the bill lacks some clarity in what all it would apply to. So I did watch the hearing in the Labor and Workplace Standards Committee, and it those were the concerns that were raised. It could potentially apply to precast concrete. It could apply to bridge products that if they're custom made off-site, and it's just a whole new area of a expansion of prevailing wage. And then also the way the bill currently stands, it appears like it could apply to stuff manufactured out of state that's custom to a project. It looks like the driver behind it was the increased amount of fabrication of HVAC materials off-site, as with the development of CAD and CNC machining, more and more ductwork, et cetera, is being manufactured off-site for public works projects. It seems like that was the driver, but it could cast a much wider net. So those are my preliminary comments.
Great.
Looks
So
like Doug and Chris are there.
go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, just want to echo Lee's statements and road department's strong opposition for this bill as well, for those reasons.
Doug.
Yeah, this is one of those bills that's lighting the building on fire.
Yeah.
Lots of testimony. It really is illustrating a divide between municipal governments and unions in particular. The concern of a lot of municipalities, both city and county, is the administrative burden of trying to verify and track, what is produced out of state, what company is doing it, if a percentage of that material is coming in from overseas. So there are lots of unanswered questions about this bill at this point, and lots of people testified. So I'd urge folks, if you want to spend about 9 million hours reading testimony, go into the record and read the testimony, because there are tons of statements in support and opposition to it.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any thoughts? So the proposal is a priority 2 oppose. So generally opposition. I'm supportive of that. Priority 2, understanding there's lots of engagement already on this.
I support that.
Yeah, I'd support Lee's and Chris's assessment.
Okay, there we go. So that's that.
I do have one other bill that's not on the list that will probably raise, Doug may know if it's getting any similar attention, but it is House Bill 2680, and it would add new certifications for all window installers or glazing contractors for public works projects. It's referred to in the bill title as fenestration certifications. But our concern here is it would limit competition. Currently, there's no company based in Central Oregon where that would meet that requirement. There's one that has an office here that's based elsewhere. And so it would really change the competitive bidding market for projects that we do with large glass and window components. So just want to mention that as well. Doesn't appear that it's been scheduled for a committee meeting yet, but just want to raise that. And I would propose we'll continue to track it, and if it goes to a meeting, then we'll report back.
How about we put 2 watch on there so it'll come up again?
I'll change it. We have it at 3 watch right now, so I'll change it to 2
Yeah,
watch.
there you go. Okay.
Okay, great.
2 watch. 2
And
watch.
then if it comes around, we'll discuss it. Okay. Commissioner Chang.
Before we wrap up here, can I just flag that a while back I mentioned there was a water bill that was coming out from the stakeholders in the basin and didn't have the correct number at that point in time. We still don't have a bill number, but it's LC 3831, and it is a bill to facilitate water banks. And so these would be great opportunities essentially to move water from where it can be saved, primarily, farmers with a lot of irrigation rights to places where that water is needed, both junior irrigation rights holders and the river. And I wanted to watch this pretty closely, because I wasn't sure if the stakeholders were all going to come together. But it seems like we just had a meeting with Rep Helm and Rep Owens, and it seems like there's support to move forward with the bill. So I'd like us to take a look at that next meeting, and hopefully there'll be a bill number by that time.
Great. So it looks like Doug Riggs had to go, but he's watching, so he'll be up on that too.
but we can at least just put it in the bill tracker.
Oh, absolutely. I support that. So yeah, so right now it's LC 3831. We're looking for a bill number and then go from there. Anything else for this meeting? Commissioner Dare? Oh, okay, good. We're all set then.